Welcome everyone to day 2 of Securely's Educational Wellness Week. This is a week-long event, a series of digital events focusing on some of the most important topics surrounding mental health, well-being and student safety. My name's Adam Smith. I'm the marketing manager here for Securely in the UK, EMEA and APAC. And I'm joined today by an incredible panel of just the best minds in both sort of the education sector and sort of the wellness sector to discuss today the mental health of pre-adolescent students. Before we get underway, I would like to introduce everyone here to the panel. So I'll start with Lucy, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi everybody, I'm Lucy Coy and I am the CEO of Head Teacher Chat. I'm an experienced school leader. I've been a school leader for 15 years plus, and I've also been a SENCO and an inclusion lead. So this is something that I'm really passionate about and very experienced in.
Brilliant, thank you, Lucy. I'll hand over to Kat.
Hi there, my name's Caitlin. I am an assistant head at Canning Hill Junior School and Federated Infant School in St Albans in Hertfordshire, and one of my many hats is a mental health lead. So I've been working for the last couple of years to develop a whole through wellbeing approach for both of our schools.
Brilliant, thank you. Alicia, would you like to go next?
Hi, my name's Alicia. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I work for Rhythm as their clinical media manager, helping create and ensure their content is kind of clinically and trauma-informed oriented and minded. In addition to that, I own and run a private practice with my husband. We work with individuals across the lifespan, but primarily with children. And I would say my personal niche is even younger children, like 4, 6 to around the age of 10 with mood disorders. So happy to be here.
That's perfect, and special thanks to you for being here. It's very early in the US right now, so
yes, happy to be here either way.
That's fantastic. And last but not least, Nadeem.
Thank you, Adam, for inviting me. Hello, everyone. So I've been a parenting coach for the last 10 years, writing several books and doing lots of work with corporates, with schools. And in the last 4 years, actually, I created the Happy Confident Company. I'll explain later, but it came from a realization that children actually really need every support they can to face life challenges. So we've been developing programs for schools and families to help children be the best version of themselves. So bringing the decades of personal development, but adapted to kids, basically.
Amazing. Thank you, Nadeem. As you can see, we've got an incredible panel of sort of minds from all sorts of different areas within the sector and all sorts of different experience. So I'm really hoping that today's conversation will be beneficial and insightful for everybody here. Before we do get underway with the discussion, just to let you know that for those of you in the audience, please do use the chat and Q&A functions if you do have any questions or comments as we go. There will be a Q&A session at the very end, which, if there's anything that, you want to kind of ask once we've finished, you're more than welcome, but do join in with the conversation as we go. There will also be some polls as we go along related to the topics that we're discussing, and we would love to hear from you and get your feedback on those. So, Nadeem, we just kind of spoke a little bit there about your kind of understanding that the mental health of very young children is something that maybe is sort of under supported or has been in the past. What sort of brought you to that realization, and what kind of misconceptions do you think there are around young people's mental health?
Thanks, Adam. A strong need and purpose to work with children came from my own realization as a parent. My middle daughter went through a tough time when she was 8, and she was very mean to me, to her sisters, and she was usually so bubbly, positive. She became a different person. And I couldn't understand it, actually. Initially, despite my parenting coach skills, I did all the wrong things, trying to reconnect her with her true self and showing her that, but it didn't work. And then thankfully, I managed to coach her through this. And she admitted that I hate myself. And that was obviously like a very tough moment for me. And particularly, thinking that I was doing all the right things, I checked with the school. They didn't see any change in her. She was still her bubbly self at school. So I just really found it difficult. And I realized that I was the lucky one who had the coaching skills to get her to say this. A lot of children would have probably not felt good, would have not, the parents wouldn't have found the right words to get them to express this. And it can get into this negative cycle where the children feel bad and they don't know how to express this because they don't know what's happening to them at that age, how they need to find. So I just changed. I thought, okay, we're helping parents. So many parents were already asking, what can we do with our children? And I would just say, oh, come on, you've got to do the hard work. Stop thinking that someone's going to take care of your children and just going to, make them better. But then realize that there's so many things that children can learn early on at schools. And when I looked at the stats, so we actually just conducted a survey in the last 12 months, over 1,300 children. And 43% of children report that they're worried about the future. And 39% say that this prevents them from basically enjoying everyday life. I mean, that's really high numbers. And I'm sure I'm not going to throw a lot of stats at you, but the big ones are 1 in 6 or 1 in 5 in the US. Children actually suffer of mental health problems in a given year. And that's children aged 5 to 16. And the biggest issue is 70% of these are not diagnosed early enough. So basically early intervention would have really prevented a lot of that, which is why our work is to work on prevention rather than cure. And actually, we say prevention rather than cure, but the reality is we are curing. And there are lots of examples, and we work with Cunningham School, and Kat here will share some of the examples. But so when kids journal, for example, or when they share feelings, they get to express things that they wouldn't have expressed otherwise. And that idea, then when it's identified early enough, it's completely different because the intervention is a lot easier. You can get them to really reconnect, to understand what's going wrong, and to just find strategies. So that's what our purpose has been. And I hope we can share lots of great examples today as to what can be done from the early years. So the program literally starts from nursery. And it all starts with emotional literacy. And then we add mindfulness, we add journaling, and then we add what we call the 10 key life skills, the 10 powers, from self-awareness all the way to growth mindset. We teach them how their brain works, neuroplasticity, empathy, kindness, and resilience, obviously. So lots of key subjects that can prepare them for adolescence and to be better human beings in general.
That's amazing. And no, the stats are really interesting because, again, I put out a poll to the audience here and asked, which age group would you say suffers most with their mental health and wellness? And we're looking at, people of, the top end, the kind of the latter years, the teenage years. But as you're saying, there is definitely evidence there to suggest that this starts much earlier, and it's probably something that we should be being proactive with much earlier. Alicia, so what we've kind of seen is that childhood has changed considerably in the last sort of 10, 15 years. The introduction of the internet into pretty much every home in sort of the Western world. We've seen just digital learning and digital classrooms become a thing like that is the norm rather than something that is the exception. Do you think these changes and this sort of evolution of the way we are both at home and at school has had an effect on young people's mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when we think of, the modern digital age, I think that we could all maybe list pros and cons of, digital screens and social media. Certainly they're, for young kids growing up who have just access to this all of the time, like you said, in these developed, Western worlds, there is this ability and chance to feel really connected. And there's access to maybe really educational, games and apps that can really enhance growth and learning. However, at the same time, so much research is being done questioning the other side. What are the potential negative implications of so much screen and digital use? I think back to a lot of the parents that I work with, and it seems to be some of their biggest grumbles is their children just don't go outside as much, and they're attached to their screens and they're addicted to their phones and their games. And we know that media and video game addictions, that can be a real thing. But where a lot of the research is trying to shift is why why are these so addictive? Why might these be having negative implications on mental health? And there's been a good number of studies done through the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University and the American Academy of Pediatrics. And what's interesting is they're looking at not necessarily how much screen time is being used, and it's coming out that maybe that's not the important piece of it, but instead how we are engaging with screens and how that's impacting the brain. So especially for young kids, right? Their brains are still developing, especially on a really deep neurological level.
Yeah.
You know, Nadine mentioned, right? Neuroplasticity. At a young age, their brains are still forming these strong neural connections. And the more rich their engagement is, the more they develop, right? Really good social skills, really good creativity and problem solving, empathy, all of those things. And screens and you know, social media, video games, whatever it may be, although they keep us busy with scrolling and they're captivating, they neurologically aren't very engaging for the brain. So they're not really making a lot of those strong neural connections as if they would if they were talking with a friend, you know, really hands-on playing. And certainly, right, the less stronger those neural connections are, that then down the road, I think in those teenage years, we start to maybe see some of the implications of that play out, whether it be attention challenges, whether it be certain mood disorders, you know, a negative impact view, you know, of themselves, and just sleep. You know, screens can really impact sleep so much, which is certainly a huge foundational piece of well-being. Yeah, it's a large question. I think, again, screens, right, in childhood, pros and cons, but we do know that whether it be in a pro or con light, it is physiologically impacting the brain, which in return, later on down the road, and even in the moment, you know, I work with a lot of kids who are experiencing those mood disorders and sleep challenges. It's impacting their mental health.
No, and I think you're right. But it's really interesting as there is so much we're still learning, as you say, about how these like the introduction of this technology or these new ways we interact and things. You know, how is that affecting the brain? You know, the brain is still such an unknown, isn't it? Really, when we look at it in sort of the broader spectrum.
Yeah, and I think technology develops a lot faster than the brain does. If we think of it, you know, across a history perspective, technology develops very fast, and our brains are just trying to keep up.
Absolutely, and I think, as you say, maybe in the last sort of 20 years, we've seen a huge boom in technology and the speed of that advancement. And that brings me nicely, actually, to Lucy. One thing that I'd love to discuss, as we say, we've had this evolution over the last sort of 20 years, but maybe within the last sort of 10, we've really seen that the change entering into schools and the education sector. You worked in schools sort of previously, in sort of previous years. Do you think there's always been a need for mental health support with young students, or is this a modern issue? Is this something that has only appeared in the last sort of decade or so?
Gosh, Adam, that is the $1 million question. I mean, honestly, being completely honest with you, I think this has been a crisis for way too long. Mental health support for young people and children has been chronically underfunded, chronically undersupported, and chronically misunderstood, if I'm being completely honest. There isn't enough people out there who really understand the importance of good mental health and how to look after it. And schools have seen exactly what Nadeem and Alicia have just been talking about. So it's really refreshing to hear other professionals saying the same thing. It's like a perfect storm, really. So yes, definitely. I think it has been an issue for a very, very long time. And unfortunately, we've got to a stage now where it's at crisis point. You know, when I was back in school last year, I was making referrals to a department that had 500 referrals every month. Well, you know, you try telling a child's parents that, you know, they're not going to be seen this year when they're at crisis point at home. It's heartbreaking and it's devastating. So it's a broken system. It needs fixing. The pandemic has only brought that now into an even deeper hole, if you like. It's enhanced everything that was there before, big time. But there are positives. You know, we've got fantastic specialists like Nadeem and Alicia and Kat on today who are going to share their stories about, you know, how we can resolve these issues and what we can do to make it better, because there are now people out there talking more. You know, we're all here today, you know, things are now actually being discussed, whereas, you know, 2 or 3 years ago, if we were talking about mental health and well-being, it was almost like a taboo subject.
Definitely.
Now it's becoming far more accessible and understandable. So, you know, I think in answer to your question, Adam, it's been around forever, but now we're having to deal with it because it's become such a massive problem, which is a good thing.
Agreed. I think it is really good that we are now addressing it, and that leads me really nicely into chatting to Kat. So, Kat, obviously, as you say, you are working in a school as we speak, and you know you're very much focused on the mental health of the students and sort of finding ways to actually engage with that and make that difference on sort of like the ground level, which is so important, because you know it's all well and good the research, but then you know what are we actually doing for the children? So in the modern classroom, just as I guess like as a broader point here, do you think there is enough time and focus being put onto children's mental health, their emotional intelligence, their understanding of their emotions and their kind of their struggles? What would you say to that?
I apologise because it's lunchtime, so there might be a little bit of noise in the background. But absolutely, and I think in a very short answer, no, there isn't enough time being spent on practicing and understanding self-regulation and emotional literacy. You know, all of those skills that come with under the umbrella of mental health and well-being. We don't have enough time. The curriculum is more and more taught every year. The pressure on teachers of fitting in kind of the academic aspects is growing day by day. You know, we now have subject leaders. Every member of staff is a subject leader who pushes kind of their subjects and their curriculum, and that is a huge amount of pressure. And I think, as well as the kind of time constraints on that, it also adds to teacher workload. And I think, you know, something that I'm sure Lucy will agree with in experience is, you know, it trickles down. You know, when our staff and our teachers and our parents are all stressed and overworked and struggling with their own mental health, that kind of filters down as well. So I think that plays a huge part in it. You know, as Lucy said, there are lots of positive things that we're putting in place to kind of counteract that. But I do think it's something that we need to really raise the profile of and make sure people are aware. And now is that time. And I think post-pandemic, we've got a really clear awareness that actually children aren't coping, and we shouldn't expect them to just be able to cope. We need to teach them the skills and the ability, give them the ability and the opportunities to learn and develop in the same way that they learn and develop their math skills. These life skills are just as important, if not more so. And I truly believe that it underpins everything else that we do. You know, if we can give children these opportunities and these life skills, then everything else will become easier and become more attainable. From behaviour improving to kind of academic results, children's ability to concentrate and to focus, to communicate with each other. You know, those friendship issues kind of diminish when we have children with good mental health. Those families that struggle, when we have good mental health, or we practice kind of communicating about good mental health, then we're more able to support families at home as well. So it's kind of a two-way street, really. That it's really difficult to do, but when we do it, you know, and when we really, you know, focus on well-being and mental health in school, then it does make our lives easier. But it is tricky.
No, definitely. And I think, you know, all children have, as you sort of say, all children have this ability to learn, and it's just making sure the conditions for them are the best they can be. And if that is an individual child who is struggling with that, it's important not just to know that, but to be able to kind of, sort of deal with that, to help them to understand, even, you know, and all of that takes time. All of that takes a lot of resource and a lot of attention for teachers. No, thank you for sharing that. It's so challenging, and I think, you know, we're seeing on all sides, as we've said here. Like, you can see it outside of school, you can see it in schools like previously, and absolutely now, sort of post-pandemic, as you say, those strains are only getting worse. So I'd like to open this up sort of back to everyone, really. You know, what you've all sort of experienced this from different angles and from different sides, and you've all got sort of different experiences in this. And I will stick with Kat just to kind of kick off, but what would you say are the biggest factors that are affecting young children within schools from a mental health perspective? And what would you say are the most sort of common mental health concerns that you're seeing?
I think that the largest or the most obvious symptoms that we see are kind of this lack of ability to self-regulate and to communicate emotion, to recognize how someone is feeling, and to be okay and happy. Not happy, but to be okay with those feelings, to accept those feelings, to process those feelings, and to sort of self-regulate their actions through that. So in kind of symptomatic behaviour, we'd see kind of aggression, children getting angry, and shouting and screaming at friends or at teachers, people, like leading on to violence. Is that sort of behaviour is the outlying behaviour that is really obvious in a classroom or a school situation, right? That's what people pick up on, and that has definitely increased. And I've spoken to many teachers across the country. Anecdotally, that has increased tenfold since the pandemic, particularly in those lower year groups. So we're talking at children coming in at reception, year 1, year 2, their ability to self-regulate their emotions and to cope with the fast-paced changes and the amount of people around them has really diminished. And we're seeing children biting and lashing out and becoming aggressive and violent towards their peers and adults, where we would normally have 1 or 2 children who would struggle, but now we're seeing 10 in a class of 30. The percentage is skyrocketed. And that to me is incredibly worrying, because that they are the children that are not coping and showing that through being outliers, having big movements, biting, kicking. Actually, that probably means that the other 20 children in the class of 30 aren't coping either, but they're internalizing it. And actually that same frustration, that same worry, that same anxiety, that same disassociation is turned inwards. And I don't think we'll really understand the impact of that until those children are much older. All we can do now is really ensure that we are putting in place the skills and support to teach them about mental health and to teach them about how to communicate that. So the first thing that we do in September is we have a school assembly right from reception all the way through to year 6, and I do it in different sections. And we look at physical health, and we talk about, okay, so physical health, we're healthy, we work our muscles, we exercise, we eat good food, we eat food, and that gives us energy. And what does that look like? But hang on a minute, even if we do all those things, sometimes we get poorly, sometimes we get sick, sometimes we feel ill to different degrees. And sometimes we just feel ill and we have a bit of a cold. Sometimes we have to go to the doctor, sometimes we have to go to the hospital. And then we kind of look at, right, okay, so what is mental health? And actually understanding that everybody has mental health, and that we can have good mental health and we can have ill mental health, and that's a spectrum in exactly the same way. That's the fundamental bit that I don't think till recently has really been taught in schools, and that's not being discussed. This idea that mental health is such taboo, something that you only talk about when you're poorly. Actually, we all have mental health, and we all have to do those things to keep our mental health good and get us in a good place. So we're doing those 5 ways of well-being, or we're being active, we're getting out in nature, we're doing all these things that support our mental health, and actually teaching those as a starting point, I think, is essential for moving forward.
Lucy, I saw you very much sort of nodding, shaking your head along. Is this is what Kat's talking about here? Is this something that you've been seeing and sort of hearing from your sort of collective of head teachers and other teachers?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. What Kat is saying is happening in her school. I saw it in my school. I've seen it in all of my schools I've worked in the recent years, but we're also getting that information from head teachers who are talking to us, and school leaders and Senkos and everybody else, teachers. They're all saying, oh my goodness, as Kat said, we used to have like a small percentage of children in the school who would suffer from mental health conditions. Now we're getting quite a considerable majority in the class with some sort of mental health condition at some point in the year. It's snowballed, to be honest with you, absolutely snowballed. And it's really sad, really, to see it happen. And in terms of, the biggest factors, I would say there's so many factors that contribute to ill mental health in young children and students. It could be something that's going on at home. It could be something that's going on at school. Everybody's in a difficult situation at the minute with the financial crisis going on in the country. So parents are really feeling the pinch. So even those parents who are normally coping well are probably not going to be coping well at the moment. Plus, on top of that, we've got what Kat was talking about in terms of a real issue about communication, getting children to communicate how they are feeling. Some children are coming to school now with real speech disorders, which we never used to have before. And some people are linking that to the rise in technology use at home, for example. So parents aren't talking to their children as much. Children aren't learning how to speak as much, and they're not learning how to converse. And then that snowballs into, like, I don't know how to say when I'm feeling cross, or I don't know how to say when I'm feeling anxious or angry or upset. So what I do is what Kat was saying is I bite, or I lash out, or I kick, or I storm off, whatever I do. But all of those things are kind of contributing to that kind of problem, if you like, in terms of the factors in school, you know. So there's so many factors, Adam.
Alicia, do you see a similar sort of thing in your private practice and your work in general? And what would you say are sort of, you know, what are the complaints that you're hearing from these children? What are they struggling with?
Yeah. So certainly, to piggyback, especially off of what Lucy was saying, I think it's really important to keep in mind when we're thinking of factors that are impacting kids at school, that school is one piece of their life and it doesn't exist in a silo. And, you know, when I see a child that comes into my office, and I think, right, if they're coming into school, we need to be asking ourselves, what are they coming in with? Anything from how was their sleep last night? What did they have for dinner or breakfast? Even asking questions in, you know, are there ACEs present? Adverse childhood experiences. We know that ACEs and those adverse experiences in young childhood greatly impact overall well-being and mental health. So really, certainly, again, right, it's scope of what you're doing. I'm going to be maybe asking and thinking of those questions more than, you know, maybe a teacher is right off the bat. But I think just coming in and having a frame of mind on, there's so many things that are going on for this child, you know, underneath that I might not be seeing. And once they're in the environment, whether it be school, whether it be home, you know, a doctor's office afterwards, having really developmental expectations, you know, being able to not expecting them to regulate, kind of like what Kat was saying, but instead needing to teach them those skills first. In terms of kind of what I see and what kids come in with, I think an interesting perspective that I have is, you know, Kat and those that work in the school system, they see the kids that have a hard time emotionally coping and regulating throughout the school day, right? Like, oh, we have more kids in our classroom who, you know, are impacted by these things and are having greater mental health challenges. And that is absolutely true. I see and I work with those kids and they talk about having, you know, these outbursts at school. And I think the level of shame that comes with that is really hard to deal with. But I think what goes unnoticed is the kids who maybe aren't displaying those challenges at school, they are still being impacted. I see a lot of kids who their outbursts or their meltdown, their tearfulness comes after school, right when they get home, because they have been putting in so much effort to keep it together all day at school. I see a lot of those kids, especially anxiety-based, they use the skills that they have and they work so hard to regulate and cope throughout the day. And then they come home or, you know, they come into my office and they don't have the energy to do it anymore. And that's when they lose it. So it almost seems like in today's age, all these kids are experiencing this. It's a matter of how much, and it's a matter of when, whether it's at school or whether it's afterwards.
No, and I think that's such an important thing to remember, that, you know, it isn't just the children that are acting up or that are displaying these things sort of, you know, in front of others. As you say, it's those that go home or that are kind of suffering in silence. Nadeem, so, you know, the Happy Confident Company tried to offer, you know, I guess, sort of emotional literacy and kind of, you know, the sort of wording and the understanding of the emotions. Do you think, you know, these children that aren't displaying these signs of sort of mental distress or you know, being sort of just struggling, I suppose, emotionally, do you think, you know, these kinds of trainings or these sorts of learnings are beneficial to those sorts of children?
I mean, honestly, I'm super emotional and touched when I hear everyone talking about all these challenges, and just want to create so much change because it's so worrying. And I did hear, obviously, Kat said it's so difficult. It's difficult. Yes, it is difficult. At the same time, what every side, all the research points to, developing positive daily habits is really life changing. So what these children are lacking is really one connection to that. So it's as Alicia said so rightly, and Kat without the internalization, etc. It's so much. There's so much suppression, and we didn't have research on suppressing feelings, suppressing trauma, and all of that stuff. Now all the research is out, and it just points to the fact that it just comes out at some point. You can't, and when you suppress feelings, actually you're reducing your cognitive ability. So even in the, I mean, so we tend to, so our default mode in today in society is we're going to go in a setting and we're going to have to suppress because we're not allowed to express these things. And that's what kids are trying to do, but they can't, as Alicia just said, they can't, it comes out at some point. So it is so important that actually when they come in school, there is a daily check-in. And Kat will surely share a bit about that. There's a check-in on feelings of where they are. And if they are actually in the unpleasant categories of feelings, either red, really intense, or blue, which is kind of more in the hopeless, powerless or whatever, or sad simply, then it's really important that they get to, often by just expressing it, it just goes in, because feeling is energy. So it could go. But if they do need an intervention, then that there needs to be something that the teacher does so that they can get back into the learning zone, into what we call the flow zone, which is really neither too excited nor too, relaxed in the right setting. That's one of the things that we're also just actually launching our meditations based on really getting the children to let go of what they come with and really get into their body-mind connection, and then manage to be back in this flow. And the journaling bit is so important. But all of that is based on what's really been now is being transformational, is the fact that, so I created these workshops 4 years ago, and I go in school and it would make an incredible difference. But oh my God, was it difficult to get head teachers or teachers to commit to 1 hour a week. It was just, no, we can't find 1 hour a week. It was just so frustrating. It's like, look at the results. Thankfully, we now managed to change this to 10 minutes a day. And in 10 minutes a day, actually, you can find 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at recess, for example, and in 10 minutes, it can be life-changing. Hopefully, Kat can give a few examples of that. But generally, basically, it's all based on 10 minutes is enough to develop positive daily habits, develop the check-ins, develop basically the basic knowledge that these kids need to finally be able to express themselves. So using emotional literacy as a way to self-express and to feel safe to express. And what's amazing is how much, once this is part of it, once it is accepted, that there's teamwork, that there's inclusion, that children help each other out. That's what we want to get into a real, so because I'm sure that the first part was actually a bit daunting for teachers and head teachers who haven't implemented a lot of, because it sounds so difficult. Oh my God, we also need to deal with their family problems at school. We already have enough on our hands. So that what's important is to actually make it accessible, available, and show that actually our programs are off the shelf. They don't need, teachers don't even need training. And it's just about getting that 10 minutes minimum. Of course, if you can give a bit more, much better, but 10 minutes can really be life-changing. And that's where I do want to mention this before I forget. We're launching on the 10th, on Monday, it's World Mental Health Day. We're launching a campaign called 10 Minutes Matter, where we're basically just asking for all governments in the world, I mean, obviously the UK being the main target, but all worldwide, that it becomes statutory guidance to have 10 minutes of mental health and well-being strategies in schools every day, because we now have proven that can be completely transformational. So I can say a lot more, but I'll let the others speak about other examples, and I'll share.
No, and I mean that the program 10 Minutes Matter it's so crucial, and it's crazy when you think that the brain, our mental health, our sort of psychology is so integral to how we go about our days, what we actually learn, how successful a day might be, and that yeah, all you're asking for is 10 minutes of a school day. And it's crazy that even feels like a stretch, that's something that needs to be requested. But, hopefully conversations like this and sort of, projects like that and other programs will help to kind of make this more of a norm than it is currently. And hopefully in 10 years, the conversation we'll be having will be very different, and we'll see sort of immense change. We have had a question here, and I think this will lead nicely into kind of what I'd like to be sort of, I guess, the happy end of this kind of this discussion. Kat, it was aimed at you actually, and they were sort of asking what you've implemented in your school and sort of the best practices that you would share. But I think I'd like sort of the broader question here is, what does need to change within the school environment or within the home environment? What needs to sort of change as a broader norm? And also then, what have you seen that is working? What advice can you give? What workarounds, what success stories are there? So yeah, I'll pass the Kat first, but I would love everybody's sort of ideas and input on this.
Thank you. I think absolutely, we've worked really closely with the Happy Confident Company, and we have lots of things in place, and we've seen huge impact, particularly since the pandemic, and the kind of crisis point that we were at, looking at children on their return to school to now is a completely different situation. And it's been wonderful to see such positive impact. First of all, it was raising the profile. So teaching children they have mental health and there's something they need to nurture and look after. Second of all, was really trying to build in the, as Nadine said, the check-ins. And because as Alicia said, we don't know what children are bringing to school. And sometimes we might hear from home if there's been an incident, or if someone's gone away, a family member's gone away, or they've had an argument that morning even, as well as the ACEs and a kind of much more bigger things that they're dealing with in their day-to-day lives. So that check-in, I have one behind me, enables children to show how they're feeling, kind of which zone they're in, which category they're feeling. And then they can learning to communicate that. And we teach right from reception all the way through to year 6. We're teaching that emotional literacy through Feel It. So that not only are they able to say, okay, I'm feeling really high energy and I can't sit still and I'm really struggling to sit at my table and just read my book because I know that's what you want me to do, but that's not how my body's working right now. Actually being able to say, okay, I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling excited, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or whatever, and actually being able to articulate those emotions. And that's a huge task, and that's not going to be fixed kind of overnight, but building it in right from the get-go so that we're kind of developing that over time is working amazingly. And then having that time, and it all does come down to time, to be able to communicate that those feelings and actually break them down. I had an example that I've used before about one of my favourite experiences using Feel It was a child who kind of was sent in from the playground because he hit somebody. And he said, why did you hit somebody? How are you feeling after he calmed down? He said, I'm angry, I'm really cross. And then actually on investigation, it turns out somebody had tripped him over and then laughed at him. He was now cross. He was completely mortified, embarrassed. There was that shame and that embarrassment that caused him to act. And if we're teaching, if someone says, okay, I'm angry, and we're teaching them how to deal with those and how to cope with those anger feelings, and then actually it turns out that he's embarrassed, we haven't given him the skills to be able to hold that feeling and to be able to react to that feeling. So kind of not only for us to be able to communicate our emotions, but actually to be able to really pinpoint where the teaching and the learning needs to happen, I feel has made a huge impact. And then from that, as we build up the school, we have the daily journaling, we have the life skills, we have meditation, we have our 5 ways to wellbeing. We also use the children as our kind of biggest advocates. So we're really keen on play leaders and mentors and buddy systems where the other children are there to talk to others, to support others, to communicate, to kind of lend that helping hand or possibly point in the right direction. And we train up our children, and they all wear kind of lanyards on the playground, and they are able, they have the check-ins themselves, they have the emotion cards themselves, but they also have kind of a whole ream of ideas and strategies about how to help children. So if someone's looking upset or looking cross on the playground, they approach them. They might have, they might take them to the side and play a game. They might take them inside and play a game. They might say, oh, you look like you need a bit of a conversation, a bit of a chat. So let's go and have a talk. Or they might go and say, okay, well, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to sit on the comfy cushions and just relax for a couple of minutes where you've got some privacy, to be able to sit with those feelings. So the whole range of different strategies, but that has made a huge impact on children, particularly kind of coming back into classroom after lunch. And that's always a bit of a tricky time of the day. Lucy's giggling because she knows exactly what I'm talking about. But we've seen a huge impact from all those different elements kind of working together to really help children to feel that they're supported and that they matter, that they value, and that their experiences are real, and that it's not just something that we're saying, well, don't be angry, or don't feel that. I think that's such an old school way of talking about it, but I think it does still happen. And I think particularly parents who might have their own kind of prejudice or stereotypes about mental health, actually it's okay to have these feelings, and that doesn't make you wrong or bad in any way. To feel bad does not make you bad, and I think that's really important learning that is happening through all these different schemes.
What's wonderful to see, everybody is unanimously agreed in our poll about what do you think would help to improve students' mental health the most within schools, and emotional learning for the students is the answer that everyone has gone for above kind of all else. I mean, Alicia, so from your point of view, I'm sure you must have seen so many children who aren't able to kind of articulate their emotions. So, what do you see as a kind of a solution to this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think certainly right. Again, piggybacking off a lot of what Kat was saying, I think providing the education and really providing the space to practice. We know, and what Nadine was saying too, we know, through the neuroscience and the principles of habit formation, that just a few minutes each day and practice, that really rewires the brain. And it makes these long-term lasting changes if we can provide a space to really practice the skills. In our outpatient practice, I think one of the most frustrating parts of doing that work is I may only get to see the child for an hour a week or an hour every 2 weeks. And that doesn't provide me a lot of time to really practice those skills with them. And I think that's where I selfishly get to work on this fix with my other role at Rhythm. We create they have a wellness check-in that is used in the school setting. And it's an emoji-based check-in where students can, answer how they're feeling at an emotional level and in a body way and socially. And it's great because it's, emojis and it's picture-based, which is really, developmentally appropriate in a lot of ways. And then based upon how they're answering, the students will then be given either an energizing video, a calming video, or if their answers are saying that they're in like a green zone, really ready to learn, they'll then be given like a knowledge-based video and hopefully taught a little bit more about a skill. And selfishly, where that feels really great is it feels like this way to address the larger problem of, okay, I get to contribute to something where, it's a product and it's a tool that children and teachers can use every day to practice these skills over time. And again, right time is the biggest piece of it. It only, takes the schools that have, rhythm and use that. They use it, whether it be in the morning or a certain transition period, they're only using it for 5-10 minutes a day. They take the check-in, they get to practice these skills that are really targeted towards their specific needs. And it's a way, for me, I get to create that content, write the videos. So, I know that they're coming from a really clinically and trauma-informed place that is hopefully, one tool that children can use every single day, which is really meaningful. Because I think, one thing we all have in common is and I imagine everybody who's on the call, we care a lot about kids and we want to do so much. And our time to do that is really limited. So being able to find these programs where we can give a lot with little time, I think is really meaningful.
No, you're so right. The awareness and having that that sort of heads up about what, how a child is feeling and being able to address that sort of quickly or efficiently. And again, being proactive, as the title of the discussion is. Yeah. It's so crucial. Even at Securely, we deal with digital safety for the most part, but we've realized that what's so important on top of that is to be aware of, when an individual child is feeling distressed or is needing that kind of intervention. You mentioned Rhythm as well. Like, we obviously work closely with Rhythm, and these wellness widgets and the kind of these sort of check-ins are becoming more part and parcel of our products, and kind of in that digital landscape where they are learning, where they're coming in from the playground, and that they're the things that they're seeing these screens. Sometimes that emotional disconnect is there because they don't have a human to kind of speak to. But if they can kind of type it into a computer, or if they can, it can be addressed there, and that allows the teacher to know, oh, that child is feeling anxious or angry, or they're not in a place to learn. It does then enable, sort of, I guess, more targeted, in the moment sort of things. Again, being proactive rather than having to wait until the damage is done, or they've already kind of had their sort of breakdown or whatever it might be. You can kind of get ahead of that, really.
Right. And I think, where Rhythm is great is you can see that individual, right, information on the child, but then it provides you data for the whole classroom, right? Teachers can click and be like, okay, well, where is my classroom at as a whole? What are the trends that are going on here? So that way, again, you might not have time to, in the moment, even though you want to individually to attend to a child, they can message, and there are ways, within the program to provide that individual care and attention, but there's also ways to be like, all right, maybe I don't have that time, or maybe I want to look at the big picture right now. Teachers have the ability to step back and look at all of those data and trends to really proactively make healthy decisions for their children's well-being, their students' well-being.
Absolutely. Lucy, Nadeem, I'd love to get your thoughts as well. I'll just go to Lucy first. You sort of have conversations with a lot of schools on a sort of regular basis. Have you seen any sort of outstanding kind of implementations of anything, or have you heard of any success stories that are worth sort of sharing here for sort of teachers or the safeguarding leads or those sorts of people?
Well, I think the great thing is, Adam, that there's so many schools now working really hard to make mental health for children and young people a priority. And I think as long as you are trying your best and you are thinking about it as a thing, if you like, as a topic, then whatever you do will have some success. Some schools are doing more than others just because they have time, capacity and budget to do so. Other schools are doing as much as they can, but anything really is better than nothing. And I think that's the most important thing to take away from this, because school staff's mental health is also stretched. So we've got to be very careful we don't overload them with too much stuff to take on. So if they're doing something to support children and young people, that's better than absolutely nothing. And I think, going back to what Kat and Alicia were saying, routine is just, I would start there. If you're going to do anything, it's free. Make sure that children have a consistent routine, which they understand and know about, and they've talked about with you. And then on top of that, going back to what Kat was saying, teach them how to deal with situations. So, I'm going to feel sad at some point in my life. What will I do when I feel sad? How will I tell people I'm feeling sad? What would I do? What would that look like? Who do I go and tell those things to? Who can I trust in my surroundings that I can talk to? Have those conversations. Don't be afraid to talk about those sorts of things, and teach children how to deal with strategies so that they've got knowledge and power when it comes to it. All of that will help an awful lot, and it costs nothing except a few 5-10 minutes. As Nadeem was saying, 10 minutes does matter. It's really important to spend that time each day just focusing on teaching mental health and calming down and understanding, strategies to move forward. So I think, it's really lovely to see, Adam, the increase in schools teaching and talking about mental health and well-being for people. So yeah,
I agree. It is definitely a sort of a heartening shift in the right direction. Nadeem, anything you'd like to sort of add to this?
Yeah, no, I so agree with Lucian. There's so many free things out there, and so it's so important. And anything that's done is better than nothing. What we found is it's really important that obviously pupils get really engaged, and the resources, the more engaging, the more well done. Basically, what we feel is there's been a lot of resources that were, not of great quality, and so that didn't get as the children as engaged as we And that's what we've really tried to put the bar at a completely different level of quality. And that's so actually I can announce that our new well-being program, teaching 10 key life skills through 10 videos, only 8 minutes length. Again, to we are all about 10 minutes a day. And they're presented by Emma Willis, who's for those who know her, basically a well-known UK presenter, and they're going to be free for old schools for the moment. But I mean, so basically, hopefully, we'll get a lot of schools signing up, and that in itself, and we're going to do a pre and post well-being surveys to actually see the impact of these. And we really literally teach children things that a lot of parents don't know. Interoception, so our sixth feeling of feeling sensation in our body. We teach them neuroplasticity, as we spoke with Alicia. We're teaching them about mirror neurons. We're teaching about so many concepts that a lot of people don't know about, but they love it. And so we're talking from age 8 to 11. So that's really year 4 to year 6, and they're all free. So we hope that a lot of schools will and that it'll make a real difference. So that's part of the 10 Minutes Matter campaign that we're launching this for free. So there are, and I think the mentoring I cannot say enough how much the kind of mentoring program that Kat mentioned, things that are entirely free again, where children really feel that they can help others. So it's this inclusion that really makes a difference. For example, there are currently, I'm not going to bash but there are methods out there like zones of regulation that's very much used in the UK for feelings. The problem is it's more exclusion than inclusion. Right. Everything that we believe that the most important thing is to create an atmosphere of inclusion, because a lot of the challenges come from feeling excluded, from feeling shamed, excluded, etc. So once you would create, and we call this the Feel It team promise, because Kat was alluding to Feel It, which is basically our main product for emotional literacy. And the Feel It team promise is about acknowledging that all feelings are okay, expressing them in healthy ways, but also about helping each other out. And the mentoring system that Kat mentioned and all of that don't need even a Feel It program are really, we feel, the basis of creating a great atmosphere where there's a lot less lashing out and a lot more, oh, can I help out? I see you're struggling. And that's what I'd love to create across society, actually, not just in schools, but if we can start in schools, then that's where we create transformation for the generations to come.
No, and I think, that is such a wonderful and sort of uplifting message and sort of prospect for the future. And I think, by the sounds of it, there are such incredible things happening in individual schools, in different sort of businesses across the UK and the US, it seems here. And I can only hope that, we see this sort of being rolled out all across, not just the Western world, but, the rest of the world as well as we move. I'm going to bring things to a close now, but I would love to open up the Q&A and the chat to those in attendance. If there is anything that you would like to ask as a kind of, a closing point or a follow-up to anything that's been said already. Just while I'm waiting for those to come in, I'd like to say that as part of Educational Wellness Week, Securely have also got a few other webinars that you can register for. Tomorrow we are looking at, this is a point that was made as well, I think, by Lucy, about it's not just the students that are facing kind of, sort of these mental struggles and difficulties. And in fact, teacher burnout is one of the sort of major talking points at the moment. It would seem that teachers in both the UK and the US are experiencing burnout and sort of, mental illness in a way that is far exceeding any other job in kind of or sector in the workplace. So tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. BST, which is 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, we'll be looking at teacher burnout and discussing how that's not just affecting teachers' ability to look after students' mental health, but what can be done and what is being done to enable teachers to have a better sort of work-life balance. And better mental health in general. Yesterday, we also looked at the dangers of the digital classroom. We looked at how, using digital devices within the classroom, how the internet and social media is having a negative effect on children's mental health. And again, what is being done, what can be done to kind of make this better within schools, at home, and kind of in that in-between space where children are bringing devices into school or taking their work home with them. That will be available on demand along with this and tomorrow's webinar later on this week. So thank you all for kind of being here. We've got some questions here now. We've got a question that says, what's one quick, simple wellness exercise or activity that I can do with my class tomorrow morning? Nadeem or Kat, would you like to take this one?
Kat, do you want to? I just spoke, so I'll let you.
Yeah, so for example, I mean, things like soft start, so they come in and they might have a game or a question, something to think about that isn't, straight in with academic work, is always a really nice, soft way of starting the day. It could be that you stand at the door and you just greet every child and say, how are you feeling today? Or there's been lots of kind of things published online about, giving each other a high five or a handshake, or using the check-ins and actually them saying, I feel like this. But that kind of greeting and that connection immediately is going to be a really nice activity. It could be that you give a children a situation, a made-up scenario, and say, how is person A or B feeling in this scenario? What could they do? And you kind of examine how they might react in that. There are lots and lots of different things, and I think there are loads of different activities that you could go with.
Yeah.
I don't know if someone else has got some suggestions.
Can I jump in too, Adam?
Absolutely.
I think something even as simple as a deep breath all together. I think if your class comes in, you could, if you're staying in front of the classroom, I am really happy to see everybody this morning. Let's take a deep breath together and start the day. And, I think it gives a nice, really mindful millisecond to just really be present with each other. And I think breathing is, from a clinical perspective, we can never underestimate the breath. Even just really mindfully creating space to take a deep breath and share a moment together can have monumental impacts on, I think, the starting the day and, again, just regulation over time. Can
I build on this, Alicia? So basically, I would suggest a vagus nerve reset, which is, so vagus nerve is where there's a lot of anxiety sits in the vagus nerve. So a great way to do it is actually, and it's like a breathing exercise, but it makes it more fun. It's basically, I'll just show it like this. So they just have to look at their hands. So hands this way, just look at their hands and then take a deep breath in and turn around to the right. And then breathe out, and then do that the other side. And it releases so much serotonin. It's just like, you just feel like you're a bit woohoo. It's amazing. Yeah. And actually a lot of people have anxiety or finding that sometimes you can do it more than once, and it just has such an incredible impact. Simple things like that actually can be fun and can really make a difference.
And I think you can't underestimate the tie between sort of physical well-being and mental well-being. So this idea of combining the two, be that with interactions like high fives and those sorts of things when you come in, to breathing exercises, combining that with that sort of stretching kind of into the air and twisting. It's kind of, again, it's centering all of those things. It is kind of making sure that the student is present in the room and that they are all together. Maybe everyone's doing those things together, so it kind of creates a sense of inclusion, kind of centers the classroom, doesn't it? And I think such sort of wonderful examples there. We have come to the end of the session, and how perfectly timed that is. First of all, thank you ever so much to everyone who has attended this session. It's been wonderful to chat with you all and kind of hear your reactions to our polls and your questions. But enormous thanks to Kat, Nadeem, Alicia, and Lucy as well for being here. We really appreciate your time. Some incredible advice. I feel very uplifted, and hopefully we can continue to help children to feel uplifted in school and sort of in the rest of their lives as well. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.